Welcome to FSHD Straight Talk, the podcast where we dive deep into living with FSHD. I'm your host, Tim Hollenback, and I'm on the journey with you. Having FSHD, I understand the challenges it brings to patients and their families. We're in this together, and this podcast is a space where we swap stories, share advice, and talk to experts to get the latest news. There's plenty to say about living with FSH muscular dystrophy, so let's get straight to it. Welcome to FSHD Straight Talk. I'm your host, Tim Hollenback, and thank you again for being on this episode with me. It is a journey we take together, FSHD. It's a crappy disease. There's no way to go around it, and some of it affects others more difficult than some. And today we're going to talk a little bit about how do we adapt our lives, the space that we live in. When do we start doing that? When do we make those really tough choices that we need to sit down with someone that can help us so that our own homes are safe havens, which they should be. It is our home. This guest reached out to me through email, and you can do the same at FSHD at FSHDsociety.org. And our guest today is going to be Dan Wilson. Dan Wilson is a retired respiratory therapist. He's transitioned his career a couple times. From the time he was diagnosed in the 80s, he worked in tool and die, worked with people to help him transition to a different career that he had for many years till he retired. I think 40 years he mentioned in this episode of that career in respiratory therapy. And then all the way to how do you use a CAPS, C-A-P-S. What is that? Well, there are people that can help you redesign parts of your home, get a home assessment as this disease transitions in us and things we can't do. They can help. That is really the purpose of today's episode. We need to find ways to adapt our home, adapt our lives, make that area safe. And when do we come to that realization that we need a certified aging in place specialist, CAPS? And we talk about how that topic will also be discussed on an upcoming wellness hour or a past wellness hour, depends on when this is aired, on July 8th. They talk about a little bit how to get those people to help you. Occupational physical therapists are usually the type that come and evaluate in your home. And Dan talks about that, how he got in connection with these people that are actually the ones that are featured on that Wellness Hour episode. So a lot to unpack in this episode. And some of the takeaways I loved, and listen for this, he explains the way FSHD is. I talked about denial with this episode with Dan a little bit. Some of us are in that stage. We do get there. And some of us maybe are in it, and then we're not, and then we're in denial again as the disease progresses. But he said he came to a realization that he wasn't just a passenger. You know, FSHD wasn't just a passenger in his life. It became the pilot. Tough transition. When FSHD is not just a passenger, but a pilot in our lives. And I think this episode directly talks about that. Being prepared for when this disease starts to kind of maybe take away things that you could do in your home. You can't now. How do we prepare? So I hope you enjoy this episode today. We're going to unpack a lot of things. Talk with Dan Wilson. I had a blast talking with him. I think you'll have a lot of fun listening to this episode. Educational, entertaining. That's what we do here on FSHD Straight Talk. So without further ado, here's the conversation with Dan Wilson. So as I mentioned, thank you guys for being here for this episode. Our featured guest is Dan Wilson. He's from the Indianapolis area, as we were just talking about before I hit record, and how I ventured that direction this last month. We'll be traveling that way again soon. And Dan reached out to us through the email, which so many of you can do at FSHD Radio at FSHDsociety.org. It's a great way to connect with me. Dan, you said the website like about a month or so ago. Is that right?
Yes, I did. Thanks, Tim, for having me. I found it on the FSH Society website where I attend the wellness hour.
Excellent. And how many the wellness hour? I mean, it's not a new group, but it's been around for quite a bit. Were you at the beginnings of when that started, or?
No, not at all. It's probably been just in the past couple of the years that I really started getting connected with the FSH Society and perusing through their website and finding out, what they are all about and what they have to offer. And I came across the Wellness Hour, saw some other links, led me to FSHD radio, and your program.
Wow. Now, are you a podcast enthusiast besides the FSHD Straight Talk show, or do you listen to other podcasts?
I do. I listen to Trackside, which is the local Indianapolis Motor Speedway podcast. Gets you update
Cool.
on IndyCar and other racing aspects of things.
Nice.
So I'll listen to that frequently. Um, but no, I wouldn't say I'm an enthusiast. I just find some things that are maybe more specialized to my taste
Hmm.
and kind of log into those.
Yeah. Nice. Nice. Yeah. I mean, I've always found that podcasts are a great way to learn or get entertained. I find that I usually listen to them as I'm doing other things, cutting the grass or something like that. And I tell my wife I call that lawnmower university, where I go on there to try
Sure.
to listen to some things and try to educate myself or refresh the mind. Hear other people's point of views is always fun for me, which is why I love these conversations. Now you have FSHD. So why don't we, like I do many guests, as I'm sure now you know, Dan, we kind of start there. When were you diagnosed and a little bit of that FSHD story and your journey?
Sure. So, yeah, I was first diagnosed back in 1980, 81,
Okay.
and I graduated high school in 1978. Leading up to my diagnosis, I really didn't have any really standout symptoms that made me or my parents think, what's going on, other than the typical struggling with the push-ups
Mm-hmm.
and the pull-ups in gym class. I had some difficulty dribbling the basketball, if you will, and I always had kind of that limp wrist kind of thing going on, but really didn't make much of it because all my other activities, it really didn't slow me down.
Mm-hmm.
So right out of high school, I really didn't have anything planned in terms of a job after high school. So I started working in tool and die and a job shop where we actually would service scales,
Okay.
similar to if you go to the fairgrounds and they want to guess your weight, you would stand up on a scale, what your
Yeah.
weight was. Well, we would take those apart and refurbish them or provide maintenance to them. Well, I was
Mhm.
having trouble lifting my arms over my head to fasten a screw. And those are pretty heavy pieces of equipment. And my supervisor that was standing behind me took notice of it and thought it was unusual and was fearful that if something started to fall my way, I might not be able to support the weight coming my way.
Wow.
So he suggested I look into that, talk to my doctor about it. And that's what kind of led me down the road to investigation of what was going on, testing, the CPK, the EEGs, and things of that nature. So it was probably in 1981, 1980 that I was diagnosed by muscle biopsy from my left shoulder. Back then, they didn't have genetic testing. So
Right.
that's where they came up with the diagnosis.
Mm. And when they gave you the diagnosis, can you recall, you know, any specifics of what they said? I mean, for me, it was kind of a no treatment, no cure. Maybe do some stuff, but don't. It's not life threatening, but it's life shortening, which I still don't understand the difference. Um, kind of what was the verbiage that they used then?
Well, it was something that it will progress. It's
Hmm.
slow to progress. Nothing in terms of, mortality being life-threatening, anything of that nature. One thing that does stand out to me, though, is when I was speaking to the neurologist who gave us the diagnosis, he said, you're probably going to want to get into a career where you're using your brains and not your muscles.
Hmm.
Because over the course of time, you're not going to be able to do the things you're doing now, like in tool and die and
Right.
servicing the
Right.
heavy equipment, things of that nature.
Hmm. Now,
So
was that a little tough? I mean, to kind of take. I mean, the fact that you're making a career in this doesn't sound like you were too far into it. Maybe the early stages of that, and then you have to shift.
yeah, not at all. I don't remember anything life-shattering or anything
Hmm.
like that because I felt
Good.
physically
Yeah.
normal. My parents, that
Hmm.
was an eye-opener to them, I believe. And so my mom and dad pursued the Muscular Dystrophy Association.
Hmm.
And okay, how can they help my son, get into a career or a path
Hmm.
that would be better in terms of longevity? So I went to a vocational counselor and went through some testing that way when it came to my physical abilities and other cognitive tests that I recall. But
Yeah.
basically, they said there's this healthcare profession that's starting to blossom called respiratory
Hmm.
therapy. And if it's something you think that you might be interested in, we can kind of help fund your education. You have a week to make a decision because classes start within like a week or two. And we just said, sign us up.
Yeah.
And so I am a retired respiratory therapist. And thanks to the Muscular Dystrophy Association, from what I recall, they help fund the textbook for those
Oh,
classes.
okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's something. That's good, right?
Yes,
Yeah. Yeah.
certainly.
Yeah. And how long were you in that field of work, or are you still in it? You said
No,
you're
I
retired?
retired in 2020. So I was in the field of work for approximately 40 years. I started out at the bedside, like most respiratory therapists and nursing students do,
Hmm.
working in hospitals. Um, Physically, I was fine for about the first 20 years or so. But then I started noticing having trouble moving patients,
Mm.
keeping up with my workload on my feet, going from room
Yeah.
to room in the hospital, treating patients,
Mm.
reaching my arms across the patient to help them, if you will,
Right.
and finding that was becoming more difficult. So at some point, I decided I think we need to look at another avenue for the career and got into outpatient
Mm.
education for asthma and COPD management,
Mm.
became an educator.
And how much of a leap? It sounds like that's kind of in the same realm, right? You said from respiratory therapist to that. Is it? Was that a nice, easy transition then to that different role?
It was because in the hospital setting, I had held several positions in education when it came to educating staff. And I also was on staff at the local technical college, Ivy Tech here in Indiana,
Mm.
and which was kind of full circle because I graduated with my degree
Oh,
from
cool.
Ivy Tech and went back and did education as a part-time instructor in their
Nice.
program.
That's
So I was
awesome.
able to transition into it pretty easily.
Mhm. And then are you still doing that now, or are you retired from there?
So I'm retired from there, Tim. Back in 2020, when COVID hit,
Mhm.
um, we see, and granted, there are many bad things that came from COVID, but there
Yeah.
are some good things that came from COVID.
Mhm.
And as I look back, I was furloughed when we had the lockdown here in Indianapolis.
Yeah.
And with my progressive weakness, I had to travel from clinic to clinic site. I had equipment that I had to schlep in my car,
Mm.
take it out, take it to the clinic. And when I was furloughed, it gave me time to look at, is it time to kind of pull away from this?
Yeah.
And so, spoke with several people, including my family, financial advisor, my priest,
Mm.
because I feel that what I got into with respiratory therapist was not my decision, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
I feel like that was a certain purpose. So when I looked at all that together, we decided you don't have to go back if you don't want to. And so I've
Wow.
been retired since COVID.
Mm. And
But
where have you shifted? People that retire either, I hear two different ways, right? They're settled in with the fact that maybe life has a different pace, maybe slowed down. They're okay with not having a mission for the day necessarily. Maybe they have things to do, groups they become involved with, and so forth. And then there's others that kind of miss the routine of like a work day or a purpose, within the day and so forth. So kind of which way did you lean? Did you feel like you still needed some type of, activity to do as much as possible as you transitioned into retirement? Was that difficult?
well, that's a good question, Tim, because I did when I retired and still to this day feel like I need to have a purpose.
Hmm.
So when I retired, we were still meeting virtually, and I did some volunteer work for the Indiana Joint Asthma Coalition.
Oh,
And what we do is we provide education to certain counties and cities here in the state on asthma management. It could be in the primary care setting, nurses, other allied health professionals,
hmm.
just to get them current and up to date on what the current asthma guidelines are in COPD and provide education that way.
Hmm. So
And
it's, yeah, go ahead.
excuse me, as a matter of fact, on the wellness hour, I
Yeah.
provided, I think I was a guest speaker on the respiratory complications of FSH, as a matter of fact. Yeah. So that helped with the purpose.
Yeah, that was going to be kind of one of my kind of branch off questions to the line of work that you did with respiratory. They tested me as well, kind of getting the baseline and where you're at and the pulmonary and all those things. So, did you ever come across someone else with FSHD within your line of work when you did respiratory therapy or the other, roles that you played in there?
That's interesting. I have never come across anybody else
Hmm.
that I can recall that has FSH.
Wow.
And I've always wanted to have some interaction
Hmm.
with those other FSHers, if you will. So that's where I find that I get that um, peace of mind that it's just not in my head. There are others that are struggling with this the same way I do with the wellness hour. But to answer your question, not in my line of work have I ever come across anybody else with FSHD.
Yeah, that was just interesting. That just question popped in my head because I thought,
Mhm.
I wonder if you did, what would that have been like, that kind of interaction?
Mhm.
I work at a nonprofit organization as my regular job. And one of the volunteers was a retired pediatrician, an older gentleman than myself. And he came in with a type of walker and other things to help him walk and move. And we got on a deep conversation about how he had something with they thought was FSHD. It was remarkable, the conversation I had with this volunteer, and his name is David, and David was telling me the stories and this of how they're trying to pin down the disease and this, and it turned out it wasn't FSHD. They actually still don't know what it is, but it's very similar. It's like attacking his body in a similar way. So for me, the first time I truly met someone else with the disease was during a chapter meeting at in Chicago area, because I was at the time the closest one. I thought I'm going to drive to this. I was not prepared for the interaction that took place or feeling a certain way. I didn't think, I'm just meeting people. So have you met someone with FSHD, face to face, had that kind of interaction yet?
Yes, I have. I actually went out to Columbus, Ohio, where they were having a Columbus, Ohio chapter meeting,
Okay.
and I believe they had a guest speaker um, somewhere on the campus of Ohio State.
Okay.
And that's been the first and the only time I had any interaction with
Hmm.
other FSHers.
Hmm. What was that? Can you recall what that first time was like?
It was exciting
Hmm.
to know that I'm a part of that group, and we had a lot in common when we were talking about our AFOs, if you
Yeah.
will,
Yeah.
of
Right.
anything. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
But unfortunately, it was just so short
Mm.
because it was a long meeting and people were just ready to go. And many
Yeah.
of us came from a long distance. But yeah, I remember that well.
Yeah. You still connected with the chapter there in Ohio area?
No, I'm not. And I've often given thought about starting a chapter here in Indianapolis. We don't
Hmm.
have one here in Indianapolis,
Right.
Indiana. The closest we have is either Columbus, Ohio, or
Mm.
St. Louis, Missouri.
Mm.
So, yeah, if there are any FSHers out there in your listening audience here in Indianapolis that would be interested in co-leading,
Yeah,
um, be happy to talk with you about that.
that's great. That would be awesome if this helped make that connection. I think that area, that state, could benefit from it for sure. I do believe there's more people that have this disease than even we all realize. I don't know how I've said this before, how rare it really is. Um, I think it's like underdiagnosed or misdiagnosed often. So Yeah, it would be cool, right? To connect and like see what other people in the community have it and then support with each other. And who knows what that leads to. We've had some remarkable chapter groups branch off to other groups, or they have phenomenal fundraising events. If it's the walk and roll or something that they kind of, organize that has kind of its own culture based on the area. I mean, just imagine if you had a Indianapolis 500 type event, right? I mean, for
Sure.
fundraising, those kind of things. So I always find it cool, like how certain states, certain areas of the country, kind of grab a hold of that and they kind of make it their own. It's always fun. It's always kind of cool to see how things kind of grow and for the sake of curing this stinking disease. Anything we can do. So it kind of led though. Then going back to, we know you have FSHD and when the diagnosis happened and those changes in your life when it came to working. But one of the reasons it seemed that you also reached out to me is because you really were kind of pointing in on maybe an area of conversation we really haven't talked about a lot. I think we've touched on it a little bit with certain guests, but kind of like the living options, right? Accommodations. How do we make those shifts where we live? I think a lot of us, including myself, are a little bit timid to think too far ahead, but yet we should be proactive in our thinking. We don't want to be caught off guard, even though this can be a slow moving disease. But so all of a sudden, you get those like stair falls of the disease gets worse and then worse. And as we get older, I think those impacts are a little greater. So, leading to the topic really that we wanted to attack was that like living options, conditions. So, talk to us a little bit about that. I guess what are the what tos? What should we be doing? How and why does that strike your interest so much, Dan?
Yeah. I think it was about 5 years ago when I just had that aha moment
Mm,
that there's going to be a point in time that you're not going to be able to take care of the house like you
yeah.
want to. Um, Mow the grass. I found that I was falling while I was pushing the
Oh,
lawnmower. That's not a good thing.
that's not safe.
It's not safe at all. The inability of just, hanging artwork,
Mm,
in the house and just the maintenance, the day-to-day maintenance of a house. Also, I'm single and I have no dependents. So I thought, one of these days, you may need some help with other things that you're struggling with now may get worse. So I started looking into those options, unloading the house
mhm.
and those responsibilities and trying to find a place where I would fit. And I came across why I had like four options I was looking at. The first option was a continuing care retirement community.
Mm,
And this is kind of like campus living, if you will. They also call it transitional care, where you go into their community and you can go in as independent living in a house or an apartment. And then as my disease would progress and if I needed more help, I would stay in that same community and then
okay.
transition into their assisted living. And perhaps there was something that happened along the way. I had a fall, injured myself. I could go into their skilled care and rehab area, but
Mm,
I would stay in that particular environment. What I found with that is there are a lot of benefits to that, but there was a large upfront fee to go into a place like this,
mm,
which they use this fee to continue to grow and build the community and pay the staff salaries, if you will. They have lots of amenities. Again, it's like campus living.
mhm.
You don't have to go anywhere else to go to the barber. You can do some grocery shopping, activities, and things of that sort. So it's all inside of the campus, which I felt was very attractive.
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
would still become a renter. I
Okay.
would still
Okay.
have the independent house, but I would pay a maintenance fee or rent, if you will, and
Mm.
my utilities, but they would take care of snow removal, lawn maintenance, and all the things that I was looking to unload.
Now, is this
So
all
that was
in
one
one
option.
big? Is that all one big building? Then you're saying when you're saying like
So
independent housing?
it's one big campus where they do have one big building
Okay.
for apartments, memory care, assisted
Oh,
living, and skilled care. But on the outskirts, on the property, are the independent houses,
Huh.
single family homes, if you will, or
Wow.
duplexes. Yeah.
Wow.
Hmm.
That's remarkable. I don't know of something like that here. I've heard of where, you can get basically an apartment type style room more or less, but it's within a common hallway, common space, everybody, I mean, you can lock the door and have your own uh um, you know, bathroom kitchenette, so to speak. But then there's community spaces where you can have meals with people, or like you mentioned, maybe some type of grocery shopping because it's kind of close to the main basics that you need and so forth. And you can come and go out of that building or area. But I like the idea that you found there where there's independent homes
Hmm.
within it. That's pretty remarkable. I never heard of that before.
Yeah, that was very um, attractive to me. However, there are some limitations to these communities. For instance, I have prepared meals that are delivered to my doorstep, and it's a
Okay.
heavy box. Okay.
Uh,
Well, this
yeah.
one community that I was looking at, I would have to go to a centralized drop-off area,
Mm,
pick up the box, take it home, drag it in, and unload it. There wasn't really
mm.
any doorstep delivery of large packages like that.
Okay.
There were community mail drop off where I would have to leave the house and go to a centralized mail pickup every day.
Mm,
When it's summertime, maybe not so bad, but I was looking more towards the limitations during the winter, colder times, ice and snow.
hmm.
Another thing I was looking at was um, curbside trash pickup and not having a centralized dumpster that I would have to heap my garbage into, if you will. So there were
Okay.
certain things on my checklist, if you will, that I needed to find the right fit
Those
as
are
I was looking for a new
those are like
place.
everyday type,
Yeah.
you know, issues that I think maybe some might overlook, but you seem to like attack those, that list like you had it. Like that just come to you naturally, or did you sit with someone to kind of go over those kind of things, make sure you're looking for this, or imagine how you live your life and what maybe those shortcomings could be, and what does it offer? I mean, how did you come up with like that that checklist that you're talking about?
Yeah, I just used my life experiences following what my challenges were over the course of the years.
Hmm.
And then one other thing that was on my checklist, and this may seem a little odd, but the facing of the house where the driveway is and the entryway south southwest. So in
Hmm.
the wintertime, I could get that melting of ice and snow. As you know, some of these communities are only going to plow the streets and the sidewalks and the driveways when it comes to maybe, well, it's here, it's 3 inches. But
Okay.
even 1 inch or a good dusting or 2 inches for you and I could be a challenge.
Oh
So
yeah.
I wanted the front of my house to face where I could get that melting, even if there was a large snow and they would get rid of most of it. Mother Nature would take care of the rest.
Yeah. Nice. Wow, that's smart. That's good thinking there. Man, I wouldn't even have thought of that. I'm not gonna lie, Dan. I
Yeah,
don't
I
I would have
think
thought of
that
that.
I've been put in these places not by my own thinking initially,
Hmm.
but that has helped a lot moving on for sure. Those experiences and just observations.
So is that where you chose then to live? That kind of community you're talking about?
No, I had a hard time dealing with the fact I had to put this, what they call entrance fee down.
Hmm.
And that's a very large amount of money, and it's all dependent on the square footage of the apartment or the house you're going to move into. And I
Yeah.
just wasn't ready for that. I think in the future, I
Mm.
might go back to something like that. So
Yeah.
I ended up getting with a realtor that I've used for my first two houses and discussing with him this patio home that I'm in now and finding a community that would take care of the maintenance, the landscape, the structure, and still meet those checklist items, if you will, and kind of found a good fit with that.
You use the term patio home.
Yes.
I personally not have heard that style. Is it a style of home? Describe that for me.
So, yeah, I think others would call it a duplex, where you
Okay.
have two single families connected together in the same building. we share, we have our separate driveways, but we share the same space, if you will, with what's
Gotcha.
called a party wall or a separation wall between my unit and my neighbor's unit.
Okay. That makes sense. That
So
makes
close quarters, yeah,
mhm. Yeah, but
but
I
it's
mean,
worked out
yeah,
well.
but then it's probably more affordable, right, than having an independent home, right? It's probably better payment wise. Am I accurate in that this description because of the style of living, or even more community based? Like, let's say something happens to you, you're kind of closer to others because you have that kind of um, call it, safety net, maybe. Are those some of the
Sure
benefits?
is. Yeah, it's nice to know that they're close by, and I'm still getting to know them, and they're still getting to know me. I think when they see me, they know physically
Yeah.
something is there, but we
Mhm.
haven't had any open conversation about it. But I
Yeah.
do, I'm becoming friendly with my neighbors to the point where I want them to be accessible if I fall,
Hmm.
um, by a phone call, if you will.
Yeah.
In terms of expense, I think it just depends on the square footage
Mm.
and the amenities and furnishings you're looking for. They can go anywhere from 200 grand to 300 grand, and a
Okay.
lot of it depends on, the area as well.
Hmm. So just like anywhere else, right, that we choose to
Yes,
live
sir.
on location, 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 they say, and that always
Yes,
affects the
sir.
price and things. Um, how about those though that maybe want to stay in their home? Is there a way you think to get like a home assessment or sit with someone to say, well, you might need this or this or this, and this is how we can help modify, so to speak, your home?
Yeah, good question. So as I was doing my research, um, in the new home where I'm at, I wanted to have some modifications put in place, grab yards,
Mm.
grab bars. Maybe what if I need a ramp? What if, and I can see this in my future, a
Yeah.
power wheelchair.
Right.
Is my space going to be safe for me now? And how do I go about making modifications now and in the future? I didn't modify the home that I sold, thinking that that might deter other sellers. But
Right.
the new house that I'm in now, I wanted to go all out with modifications. So I found through NDA's Quest magazine, an issue in 2023 on home modifications, certified aging in place specialists.
Hmm.
And there is a website that I found to locate one near me, and it's called seniorresource.com. And there are several links to find a certified aging in place specialist.
Hmm.
So I found one here in Indianapolis. There are two occupational therapists,
Mm-hmm.
and they came to the house, and we did a front door to back door, all the rooms
Hmm.
assessment, and they gave me recommendations on where to place furniture, how to keep the space open for my rollator, or if I need to have a power chair in the future.
Hmm.
And of course, one of the primary focusing areas was the bathroom,
Hmm.
how to
Of
be
course.
safe in the shower.
Hmm.
And they also gave me plans on a shower remodel that I can use, take to any contractor
Hmm.
with an inventory list of materials,
Wow.
description of what needs to go where based on ADA recommendations to do a bathroom remodel. So they were very helpful. And
That's
getting
phenomenal.
me comfortable in the house where I'm at now.
And did that assessment cost anything to do?
Yes, it did. It cost me $350. They were here for a solid 2 hours,
Mm.
gave me a formal written report and left that with me.
Mm.
Um, and as I was speaking of the certified aging in place specialist during one of the wellness hours,
Mm-hmm.
one of the wellness hour participants mentioned that insurance might reimburse some of that cost.
Really?
Now, I
Huh.
wasn't aware of that, and I just really wanted to get somebody in and get things going, so I really didn't do
Right.
any research on submitting that to my insurance.
Mm.
But I guess there might be some reimbursement for that.
Yeah. Yeah. I that's not too bad, right? For an assessment cost, we get experts in there. were there anything that they said that were eye-opening to you that you never thought of that you would need?
Oh, most definitely.
Yeah.
When we went into the master bedroom, I had my idea of where I was going to put the bed and the dresser. Now, just backing up a moment, Tim, I
Mhm.
had them come in before I was totally moved in
Okay.
and was giving them some ideas on where I was going to put furniture.
Okay.
So in the bedroom, my idea of where to put the bed and the dresser would have put me at risk of falling if I bump into the bed or bump into the dresser on my way into the bathroom, which is in the same room,
Oh,
because it was just a narrow pathway.
yeah.
So they'd suggested I put my bed in one area, my dresser in the other, and
Hmm.
that is a total improvement because that whole bedroom space is now open. If I'm having a bad leg morning, I can grab my
Hmm.
rollator and go right into the bathroom or outside into the living space with no obstruction. So yeah, that was
Nice.
an eye-opener for sure.
Nice. Yeah, those are, it sounds like it's needed. When do you recommend someone should start looking into that?
Wow. So I think any time is useful for their services. If you're going to go into a new home, locate a local certified agent in place specialist and discuss with them as well, you know, what they feel is a good time for them to come in to do the assessment. As a matter of fact, our next wellness hour, which
Mm-hmm.
is scheduled for July the 8th, that is 5 o'clock p.m. Eastern time.
Yep.
They're going to have guest speakers who are certified agent in place specialists to go through the assessment process. And keep in mind, they're also certified. They've got to go through training and certification and have to update this regularly to do what they do.
Mm. Yeah, I suppose that they're gonna have to keep up with what the changes are, and either it's regulations or improvements. And like maybe one idea was good years ago, it's not necessarily the case now, and they have to be on top of that. Yeah, as I pull it up, it's at fshdsociety.org. Depending on when this episode airs for people, but it looks like Haley Conway and Sam Colomel, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Sorry, Sam, if I am mispronouncing that. But those seem like the two people that you're probably talking about. They're going to come in during that wellness hour. And they say here that they're from the Indianapolis area. Do you know them then? Were those the same people that helped you?
Yes, those are, Tim. They're the same two occupational therapists
Hmm.
that came to my house and went through the assessment. And very, very engaging. That is for sure. I
Hmm.
did not feel uncomfortable speaking to them in some private matters, as a matter of fact. When you're in the shower, that's a pretty private environment, but you want to make sure you're not going to fall.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
we had to have some discussions about what's going on in there, as well as going out from the house into this little back patio area I have. I have an approximately 5-inch step, and I have difficulty with steps. So we talked about a transition ramp that would go down there, and I've since purchased one. It's made all the difference in the world. So
Nice.
yeah, they're going to be the guest speakers for the wellness hour on July the 8th.
Hmm. Did they, when you talked about what you had, did you specifically say, I have FSHD? And if so, did they know what it was, or did you have to do a little bit of kind of a educational, quick, walkthrough of what the disease is about with them?
They did not know about FSHD. I did tell them that's what I had and kind of gave them an overview. And you could see their wheels turning, if
Yeah.
you will, and things were clicking.
Yeah.
We talked about my reaching limitations, especially in the kitchen. Now, when they come in, it's not an in-home occupational therapy session or treatment, but they did take the time to discuss the pull-down racks that I might consider
Hmm.
for dishes and glassware that are
Cool.
in the cabinet. Because, like, as you and I know, we can't reach up to get a
Right.
glass.
Right.
And just how to set the table and chairs and things of that nature for easy access in and out.
Hmm. I
So
love
yeah,
that.
they
Love that.
they didn't know ahead of it before. I believe, if I think right, Tim, I may have sent them a brochure on FSHD to kind of review before they came to get an idea of what that was.
Nice. Nice. And then to have that connection, did you end up booking them then for that wellness hour? Did you were you the person that kind of like I do with you, Dan, booking you as a guest? Were you responsible then for getting those two on the wellness hour?
Well, I reached out to Renee Beaker, who was one of our FSH Wellness Hour leads, and I believe she and June, I reached out and made mention to them.
Mm.
And then they contacted Haley and Sam and booked them for our wellness hour.
The people that we all, I think, at some point are going to need that kind of assessment. I think it's a good thing to do. We've talked about when you start looking into that and this. But that also means if we're thinking about looking into it, we've kind of come to grips with the fact that this is going to be needed. But I have a sense with many guests I've talked to that sometimes there's I don't know if it's denial or if it's resistance or if it's just this we don't want to admit it. So I guess it is a little bit of denial, right? That this is happening or this could get worse. For the people that might be in that realm that are listening or watching this episode with you, Dan, like what's the advice that you would give them? And it might be some tough love that like you might have to say to them, but what would be kind of your message to that?
Yeah, I can relate to that, Tim. It took me a while to get out of that denial mindset. It
Mm-hmm.
took me a while to get engaged with FSHD society because I felt that every time I looked into it, it reminded me of what I had.
Mm.
And now what I would say is, work with your loved ones, talk to your pastor, talk to your doctor about it. Just engage in some way, even if it's for a small amount of time, with FSHD Society website. Do a little research. You don't have to be, so to speak, an active talker or participant in the wellness hour,
Mm-hmm.
but if you just view one wellness hour, I think you will find you're not alone in this journey.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to learn a heck of a lot from those of us that have going have gone this journey for several years
Yeah.
and how to adapt your life
Mm.
and work with it. Um, like I was saying in an email that I sent you, for the longest time, my FSH was just a passenger.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
wasn't limiting for me from doing anything. But as I got older and things were happening, it was becoming more of a pilot, if you will. So I had to have a talk with my pilot, say, okay, let's just kind of co-pilot this thing together.
Wow. Yeah.
And that has worked well.
Yeah. That's brilliantly put as I give myself a tongue twister. Yeah. The passenger to pilot. I love that. I love that analogy. That is spot on a way I've not thought about it before. I think we have to be ahead of it, right? To some degree. And we got to kind of lean into the uncomfortable moments. That's how we learn. We all have done that throughout our whole lives, right? You venture into the space that you don't know much about, you learn, you educate. I think this kind of lives in that realm. So with that, you had people help you that didn't know about the disease. We've had guests on that have talked about, is this really a rare disease? So one of the kind of the general questions that I asked specifically on World FSHD Day with some of the guests that we had on that event was, what do you wish people knew more about FSHD?
That's a good question. I just think I would like them to know more that it is a thing, but how to recognize it,
Yeah.
because it can be hard to recognize. I think I would like the primary care community, our doctors, to know more about it.
Mm.
Perhaps if it's a way that we can, in some way, provide them some online learning tools. Most of us in healthcare are always looking for continuing education credits, and we can do a lot of that online. Why not provide them with a suite of education about FSHD?
Yeah.
So when they have a patient that comes in, maybe a child or a teenager who's starting to demonstrate the physical signs, mom and dad bring them in and really can't understand why they're tripping a lot or just
Hmm.
can't keep up with their peers
Yeah.
or throw the football like they should. Their primary care physician at least might have something in their back of their mind about, maybe it's this FSHD thing. Let's look into that a little bit
Yeah.
more.
Yeah. Totally agree. It should be a little bit more in the forefront of when they see these certain symptoms that, um, at least to rule it out, if anything else, right? To be educated and then to know what path of care. Um, so then the final question I have for you at the end is the question I love to ask people, and we've talked a lot about the physical of this disease and how it affects us, and as it becomes, as you put it, more the pilot of ourselves, and um, coming to grips with that, and making sure we're living the best we can in the space we have, right, in our living conditions. We talked a lot about the physical. So, but in your opinion, when we talk about the disease, I like to ask, where does it affect you more, even you personally? Is it the physical side of it? There's also this emotional, mental side of the disease that it kind of attacks us that I don't think people really realize too much at all. So, lack of a better way to phrase it, like, what do you think is worse, physical or the mental side?
Yeah, for me, Tim, I think it's a good 50-50 on most days. Some days it's 80-20,
Yeah.
physical, mental, or vice versa. A lot of it depends on the day, but over the years, finding that it is taking away a lot of what I used to do, being active, fishing, canoeing, boating, camping. I'm in Indianapolis, Indiana. Love to go to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway.
Yeah.
But the steps going up into the stands and the walking from the car and back, the physical aspect of it, I think overall the physical limitations and the physical abilities that it's taking away impact me mentally on any given day more so than the physical on some other days, if that makes any sense.
It does.
That's a really good question. But for me, overall, I think it's probably 50-50
Yeah.
physical, mental, emotional.
Hmm. Yeah. It always seems, I think I weigh in most days as you do, um, where I might feel okay physically, but then something kind of happens. If it's a trip and fall where I can't recover myself where I used to, and I know I'm going to hit the ground when maybe a year or two ago or whatever it may be, I might have been able to bounce back from being a little off balance and I'm still standing where now it's like, no, you're just going to fall down. That's just how it works. And coming there, I don't know if there's ever really a coming to grips with the fact that this is
Yeah.
happening, right? It's man, I guess it's just more or less coping, adapting. And we talked a lot about that today with adaptation. How do we prepare our space? And I think that might help with our mental side of this disease. I think if we're more prepared for what could happen to help us live our lives the way we want to, and being realistic with that, right? With the space we live, I think that's going to give us more confidence to make us feel better. And preparing our homes, preparing our space, and definitely thinking more proactively. So I think you brought that right to the front of our minds today, Dan. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing those things with us, as well as plugging the wellness hour. We love that. Love that you found that, and of course this podcast. I'm glad that you're a listener. You kind of joined us with this show, and being brave enough to be a guest. So thank you very much for that.
Well, thank you, Tim. It's been a fun ride here and looking forward to listening to more of your podcasts.
Thank you. Absolutely. Hope you do. And maybe we'll have you on again in the future. Sound good?
Sounds good.
Awesome. Thanks, Dan.
You bet.
So that is Dan Wilson. Great guest. Reached out. My life got in the way a little bit a couple times. We tried to book the show. He was so patient to kind of stay with me here, and we booked it and really was excited to have him on today. I knew he had a lot of knowledge to bring to the table, based on his life of working in respiratory therapy and healthcare, having the disease, understands transitioning in your career, understands transitioning in your home. It is not a sense of defeat. It is a sense of purpose. I don't like using the term live your best life, but I guess maybe that is what it is when you're doing something like this. And as he plugged, it is the Wellness Hour, July 8th. So if this airs prior, catch it. If this airs after, pretty sure you're going to be able to find it where they post those past episodes. And really the takeaway to me is find that certified aging in place specialist, CAPS. They're having Haley Conway on and Sam Colmel on. They're from Indianapolis area. They actually helped Dan Wilson in his home and how to organize and prepare and so forth. Yeah, there's a cost. There is. I mean, FSHD, and we all know this, and even the FSHD Society has run a cost spectrum project of what does it cost, us, not just in our bodies, but physically, economically in this. There is a cost. And unfortunately, that's how this goes. And any resource we can use, he talked about other resources within, government agencies and so forth, or insurance can help maybe, recoup some of those costs of getting this assessment. But can you afford not to do it? Can you afford not to make those changes or be proactive in it? Listen to your family members. Find the people that you trust. Dan listed them. If it's your family, your close friends. He mentioned a pastor, a priest. If you're a spiritual person, if you need that kind of guidance to kind of go through this, those are all the resources you should be using in your community. Grab a hold of those people that you trust the most. Let them give you that tough advice, right? Yeah, you probably got to do this, man. I've seen that you're slowing your walking, or you trip a little more. They're the ones that kind of see the changes, because you might not see them all the time, but you trust them. Maybe it's a friend you don't see every day. Maybe you only see them once a month or something like that. They might see that progression a little more real and be able to tell you, yeah, you know what? I can help you do this, or need someone to be there, or hey, you need some stuff installed in your house, or you want me to help make those arrangements to have someone like that come in. Find someone to help. There's nothing wrong with asking for help. I think I mentioned way back, past episode, one of our very early episodes, we had two friends on that took this massive hike through Spain. You can find it. It's definitely out there on FSHD Society Radio on those episodes. And they ended up making a documentary called I'll Push You. And these two best friends, walked through Spain, this massive journey, hiking journey. It took weeks, and they went through it together. And the gentleman that had the debilitating disease that put him in the wheelchair, that sent him on this quest to do this together, people asked him, do you feel like you're a burden? He's like, no, it took me a long time to realize if someone wants to help me, I let them. I don't want to rob them of that. That's what they want to do. I let them do it. That's a big lesson. And I think in this situation, it has to happen. So thanks, Dan, for joining us here. If you want to be a guest on the show like Dan, if there's a topic you want to talk about, I'm wide open to hear it. FSHD Radio at FSHDsociety.org. You can find the Wellness Hour, anything else going on, if it's chapters and so forth, meeting up. He talked about the Columbus, Ohio chapter, plug the St. Louis chapter near him. If you want to help Dan Wilson join or create, I should say, a Indianapolis area, hey, trust me, FSHD Society can help. It's basically everything put together to help you move along on your way. You can have fundraising events, definitely engagement type meetings. It's an awesome experience. So if you're willing, maybe, reach out to me. I can get you in touch with Dan Wilson, or reach out to FSHD Society. I'm sure they can connect you as well with him and get something brewing there. So thanks you again for joining us on this episode. Look forward to the next. You've been listening to FSHD Straight Talk. Take care.